Welcome to Lumient Live. I'm your host, Mark Ackroyd. Lumient Live is the podcast for advice professionals that believe in a values-based advice experience, but still have that question, how does it all work? We connect listeners with other advice professionals to hear best practice client stories or business examples and lift the lid on how they made it happen. Now, on to today's episode. G'day. Well, today we have two firsts on this episode. We have our first guest from across the ditch in New Zealand and our first advisor guest for season 2. We're joined by Director and Financial Advisor from Liberty Life in Auckland, New Zealand, James Gray. G'day, James. How are you?
How are you, Mark? Good to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's good to be the first Kiwi.
Hey, someone's got to do it, and it's a privilege to have you as being that person. So you're flying the New Zealand flag.
Great.
So, mate, a little bit about Liberty Life for those that don't know Liberty Life. The primary types of clients that you see, are self-employed business owners with young families, typically in their mid-30s. I love that level of specificity, so I reckon that's great. As our American colleagues tell us, niches to riches. Having that niche specialty is really great for honing in your value proposition. So I love hearing that you're so specific. The average investable assets of your clients are around $200,000. Average upfront fees around $1,000. Average ongoing fees around $2,000. You have 150 clients on contract at Liberty Life, which is excellent. You're the sole advisor of the business, and you're joined by your lovely support staff, of which you've got one as well. But outside of the practice profile, mate, tell us a little bit about yourself and your business.
Oh, well, I've recently become a under-6 rugby coach. Son has recently started Ripper Rugby, so that's taking up a bit of time.
Nice. How's the team going?
It's a bit of chaos, as under-6 rugby normally is, but it's a lot of fun. We're learning a lot, and we can really see the kids developing their skills. So it's been rewarding.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, obviously married, 2 children, run the business with my lovely wife Tanya, and outside of work, love my sport, rugby, surfing, and doing things with the kids.
Mate, lovely. Sounds like you got plenty going on there. So James, the reason we've got you on today is we heard a ripping client story about how you brought values-based advice to life with your clients, and in particular, one of your clients that sent you a lovely email to show the impact of when we get this right, it'll have not only on the client, but in this instance, on the environment, the world. So for the audience listening at home, I'm going to read an excerpt from this email that you shared with us, which I personally love. And then we're going to go straight into the client story and get you to tell us a little bit about them. So here's my movie director voice. It'll probably sound exactly the same, but if you could imagine, this is the email. A bit of an update, RE, our goals. We have planted 600 natives in the wetland over the weekend, which is certainly a step in the right direction. More planting and clearing to come. As a bit of a celebration, we had a little midweek date at the Rimu Wine Bar in Mapua, where I work part-time. This was thanks to you. Discussing our goals and values and putting them in writing has been really helpful for me. Wishing you a great day. Kind regards. Insert client name here. I've taken it out for obvious privacy reasons. But yeah, James, I can't help but smile as I read that. How does that make you feel before you tell us a little bit about the client?
Oh, look, to get that validation from a good client was fantastic. It was really rewarding to get that feedback. Made my day, because we've gone through this process with a lot of clients now, And it was quite special to get that feedback from this particular client who've had we have a good and long relationship with. So it was fantastic.
Well, let's go there then. So tell us a little bit about that relationship you've had with a client. Obviously, have you always had these types of conversations? Have you always been working towards this, or is it just a recent thing that you found out? Give us a little bit of a timeline of how you've been working with the client.
Yeah, look, you know, our dealings with the client have been more on a traditional focus when we think about financial planning. Um, uh, we we didn't go deeply into to values and unpacking, what's really important to them in their lives. And just to provide a little context, over the last 12 to 18 months, we've been really looking at ourselves as a firm and exploring, how can we do things better? How can we provide that better client experience, especially focused on that non-financial spouse, because a lot of the time um, they're there because they have to be there, not because they want to. And it's engaging with that non-financial spouse to make the experience more real for them, and more meaningful. So this particular client we've been working with for a while now. They're married. He's a professional in banking. She works part-time. She's just come out of a long career as a flight attendant. They're in their early 50s, and they're working hard, and saving hard for their desired retirement, which we've obviously helped them put plans in place for, in terms of the insurance and the saving investment advice approach. But we recently, took them through the Lumiere process, and went through the values session with them, and unpacked some of the goals across those values. So that was that was very meaningful, and really rewarding process, because I got to understand them more as people, and I got to understand their backgrounds more, obviously their values, and then we really helped them to align their non-financial goals, because we knew a lot about their financial goals, but it was really the non-financial goals that came out, especially with the non-financial spouse, and how much those goals were important to them living their best life. And so it was really a rewarding process, unpacking those values with them, asking the why, and getting deeper, more holistic with those clients. So it was fantastic.
I love hearing you say how rewarding it is. This is why a lot of advisors get into the game, right? It's about changing lives. It's about understanding their client and helping their client any which way possible. And it's certainly a theme that we hear a lot from our advisors in our community. Can you take me back to the start of the experience that you've gone through, right, with this client? So they've been a client for a while, and you've obviously recently started using Lumion. How did you introduce to these clients who have been clients of yours for a while, and you've had a plan with them for a while? How did you introduce that? Hey, we're going to do something a little bit differently today. That must have been a bit awkward and weird.
But an apprehension. It was call done via Teams, so it wasn't a face-to-face. It was a video call. And I introduced it first in an email to them, with an agenda of what we're going to be doing, and I said we're doing things differently now as a firm. We're trying new things. This is what we believe will serve you guys best going forward. We value this process a lot, and we think it can add really real value to our relationship and to what and our advice to you. And then in the session, it was really going through the process, going, identifying the value cards, getting them to select 5 each, and then taking them through that journey of unpacking what those 5 values mean to them as individuals, and then selecting 5 values that that aligned to them as a couple.
So, so when you introduce this to them, a bit of apprehension, I assume, from your part. Was there any apprehension from their part, or were they 2 feet in, ready to go?
Body language tells a lot, and you can see on their faces, what's this? Do we really need to go through it? Type of thing. Not so much an eye roll, but almost there.
Yeah, a physical eye roll without the eye roll.
Yeah. But I think you can certainly tell the point in the conversation when the switch goes on for them, and they think, wow, actually this conversation is something I've never had before, especially with a financial advisor. And you can see that turn in the conversation where the light goes in and they think, wow, this is actually really valuable. What we're talking about here is really valuable. And with this particular couple, I could see that some of the things that they were raising, they hadn't actually, spoken to each other about. And so it was almost giving them that platform to talk about these things and air them out. And yeah, I think that was the real turning point for them, probably 15, 20 minutes into the conversation.
Yeah, so you're 15, 20 minutes in. What was the point in the conversation where you saw the aha moment? Was it something they said, or was it something you did? Like, what was, if you could take me into that moment, could you describe me what was happening?
I think when we're really unpacking the values, and I think when the wife was talking about her values, because obviously start with her being the non-financial spouse. That's what we always do. And I think you can see on the husband's face that, oh wow, some of these things that she's raising are things that are really important to her, but we're not doing. So we need to put a plan in place so that we achieve some of these non-financial goals that are important to her.
Yeah, could you remember what were the things she was saying? What were the things that you might have heard for the first time, or her partner heard for the first time?
Yeah, so one of the things was how she was talking about spending without guilt, because they are saving hard for their retirement, so there's not that much disposable income. But hearing her say that it would be nice to go out and spend some time together, go to a restaurant or a bar and just treat each other to a nice experience with each other, spending time with each other, was really revealing in terms of what they're currently not doing or want to be doing more of. And also with the planning of their native wetland. It's a big project for them, and it's been a real weight on their shoulders, because it was stopping them doing other things like their cycling, their running together, because every spare moment they had, it was dedicated to the wetland. So having them talk about how can we speed up the completion of this wetland so that we can do the other things that are important to us was a really valuable conversation, I think, to them.
And what did you observe or hear from the husband as the wife was speaking through this?
Before that conversation, he was probably the one that thinking, "Oh, do we really need to go through something like this?"
Yeah.
Um, Probably the typical bloke. Uh, but you know, once we start, once we started unpacking it, diving deeper into those whys around values, you could definitely see that his whole body language changed. He was looking at his wife and really listening, um, and and then when it was his turn, he was much more engaged in it. You could see that.
I like that. You've already told us this is on Teams, so I'm imagining, uh, this isn't great for an audio podcast, but if you are watching on the YouTube channel, I'm imagining two people, sort of sitting next to each other, looking directly straight ahead of the screen. And what did he just start turning over to her
Yeah,
and
yeah,
acknowledging
sort
her?
of, yeah, turning more towards her, and yeah, really, really listening, and yeah, you could see that he was taking mental notes.
Yeah, great. And you mentioned, it made him open up more when it got to his turn. So, for those that aren't familiar with the Lumiant process, obviously the non-financial spouse goes first, and then we unpack those values and what they mean to them and what's important to them first. But then the financial spouse gets their turn next. What did you hear from his responses? Were his responses influenced by his wife, or were they responses that surprised you? Tell me a bit about the impact there.
Their values were quite similar, um, which meant that they're, they're quite a aligned couple. Sometimes we see real differences in the values. So he was coming from it from a more financial point of view. So it did take more questions from myself to kind of go a bit deeper into those conversations around why that's important to him, and why he was giving the answers he did.
Can you can you take us down that question path? So, um, we find this quite a bit, right? Especially with a financially orientated spouse, that they'll give a really surface level answer when you ask them, why is that card important to you? And typically it is, quite financial. So if we take, an example being spend without guilt, a really classic financial orientated spouse who's not quite sure about the experience would go, well, isn't it obvious that everyone wants to spend without guilt? Like, I just want to be able to spend. And it's up to the advisor then to really put them in that uncomfortable position, but the right position, to go a little bit deeper and tell us more about that, because quite often the non-financial spouses, already born their soul because they're used to that conversation. They're more emotive. What questions did you ask? What did you say? What did you hear from him that made you go, you know what? I'm going to keep asking until you give me the answer I'm looking for here.
Start off with, if we want to dive a bit deeper, why is that important to you? And then we dive a bit. I suppose it's just asking that question. Why is every answer that's given? Why is that important to you? So that we deep dive, get a deep dive into it. But one of my favorite revealing questions is, what's happened in your life or the life of someone that you care about that made you answer, or value, answer it this way, or choose this card. And that's a very revealing question, because it gets them thinking about their background or how they were brought up, and can reveal a lot about that inner motivation.
Yeah, I love that. that must be a very different question to how you've run, advice experiences in the past. It's not often in any training manuals. How does that make you feel when you ask that question?
Yeah, look, when you know when I first started asking that question, it can be a bit uncomfortable to ask it. But I found that it's such a successful question to ask, and it really gets down deep and gets you that answer that that tells you so much more or what you're looking for. So it's something that I always have in my arsenal there.
Do do you lead with it, or do you wait until the time's right? Like, how do you use it? Because it is a very powerful
Yeah.
question.
Um, well, I normally leave that one for the last to just see how the conversation is progressing. Um, if if we're not getting deep enough, then I'll ask that question. But it's a question I always tend to ask because it really gets dives deep.
Yeah, and
With
what
what
did you learn this time around for these clients when you asked it?
Yeah, so with the spend without guilt, um, that was really about them. Oh, well, in their backgrounds. I think he grew up in a household that uh, there wasn't a lot of money, and so uh, money was you know really prized, and there wasn't a lot of money for luxuries, and so I think that's kind of carried through, um, and so it was really that conversation that we had was giving them, or especially him, permission to treat himself, and spend the money because they can spend the money. It's not like there's no money there. So that was really revealing. So that was a great conversation to have.
Yeah, I love that. And, you know, what what is it that you do with that information for the audience at home, right? So you learn a lot about it, but what's the impact getting that information has on the advice you give, or maybe the relationship you have with those clients? Like, what is it that you do with it?
Yeah, certainly, it definitely impacts your advice, um, because you know what's really important to them, and living their best life. So um, it alters the strategies for your advice, and that understanding of where you're going with the client, and why the financial plan is important. So it's we've made some changes, certainly from the conversations we've had, um, not just on the financial side, but on the non-financial side. Like I asked permission for accountability on some of their non-financial goals, which they gave me, which is great because if you're not held accountable for a goal, it may not be achieved. So they recognized that, and I've got an email that I send to them every month saying, "Have you done this?" or "How's this going?" And they really appreciate that because it keeps them on track, keeps them within those guardrails.
Yeah, so rewarding. It's a great statement. Setting a goal without accountability, um, you might as well not even have it, right?
Yeah,
Because
that's right. That's right. And it's just it's uh, you know un- unraveling or identifying their values and their goals has allowed me to better understand what they want to do in retirement, what's important for them to do in retirement, um, and that is when the time comes, you know that that strategy that we had before the conversation would have looked different to now. And so that's certainly been a material change on what we're going to do, in 5 or 10 years' time when it comes to to their retirement and what they want to do.
How powerful is that? You keep saying the word rewarding, and it must feel so good. If I take you back to right at the start of today's episode, you mentioned one of the reasons you started going down this process was you were thinking about how you could do things better. I wouldn't mind just maybe stepping outside of the client story and stepping into your business hat now and just ask you a couple questions about that statement because that's an incredible reflective exercise to do as a director and an advisor in a business to make that shift and sort of change the way you have those client relationships. What was it that prompted you to think we should be looking to do things a little bit differently or better, and what was your thought process there when you were looking at doing that?
Been reading a lot about client experiences and how valuable that can be to any business, right? And then we examined the way we did things, and we used a pretty traditional model, and we thought, oh, there's got to be a better way to do this, because it's the way we've been doing it, it's just not providing that client experience that we want, at the front end, but as well as the ongoing relationship as well. And so it was investigating what's out there in terms of this model, or this model of improving the client experience, and ideally having it in a digital platform. So there's this ease of use for both the client and the advisor.
Yeah, that's cool. The thing that stuck out for me there is you had a view of what you wanted an experience to look like, and you were assessing that against what you were doing. What were the things in your ideal experience? Like what were the things that made you go, we need to be doing this? Like what were those things?
Yeah, look, it was about having a more holistic conversation with the client, because as an advice firm, we can provide advice on a number of different financial products, and so it was really having a process to give us that diving deeper and making ourselves, building that trust quicker with clients, and really showing that we are really interested in helping clients, live their best life first, but also look after the financial stuff as well.
Yeah, there's the money. Like, there's my little social media grab, I think. It's that whole concept of building trust quicker and demonstrating to a client that we're here to help you live your best life first, and then handle all the money stuff second.
Yes. Yeah. One thing I will say too is that we're conscious that his robo advice is here, developing, and if you're not having these deep and meaningful conversations with clients, understanding them more as human beings, and helping them with their lives, then you may become irrelevant. So it's about having that human connection, which we thought the traditional model wasn't ticking all the boxes in.
Mate, that's completely fair. Do what the robots can't, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, James, this has been a great conversation. We started with your impressive client story, that really rewarding email, where you've helped a client, that you've had for quite some time realize, how important their own personal wetland project was, but not at the expense of things like connecting with each other, for date nights, going out and sitting at a bar, spending money without guilt, so that they weren't putting it all away for their retirement fund. I loved your examples of how you got to that experience. Your consistent asking of why is that important to you, and when the time's right, whipping out the big guns, being what's happened in your life that's made you pick that card. And sitting with that apprehension and uncomfortability as an advisor and asking that question, that's a very real feeling out there. I think, we can say this on a podcast, but when you're in that moment and you have to ask it and you have to be okay with the answer, it must be gut wrenching at times. So, I thank you for sharing that and sharing that feeling with the audience. I think that'll be well received. And I love that you've, for you, it's all about amplifying trust, building trust quicker, and getting clients to understand that you are there to serve their best life first. There's some really great wise tips in there. If I was to ask you, as I do all our advisor guests, one tip that you would share with your advisor peers that are maybe considering going down a values-based advice experience, what would that tip be?
Look, Mike, I know that you've had this one already, but it rings really true to me when I thought, when I think about this, and it's just start the process. It's going to feel uncomfortable, like any new process does. But the way we started it is that my wife and I we completed the process ourselves. Then we had some practice with some friends and family. And then we moved on to existing clients, and now it forms the foundation of our advice process. But we're still learning, we're still developing it, and we're no means experts. So no, there's always learnings, which is great.
Yeah, and that's where your great curious mindset that you've applied to even how you're thinking about your experience you provide to clients will serve you so well. Yeah, that's a great tip, mate, and I think really reaffirming for our audience that have sort of followed this series, and are just looking for that trigger to go, you know what, I'm going to do this. So James, on that note, mate, thank you so much for joining us today, being our first Kiwi guest. Very exciting. All the best with your clients and your advice experience. I can't wait to see more of those emails come through about how you're helping clients live their best lives. Thanks for sharing, mate.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Great to be on.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Lumient Live. If you really enjoyed it, we'd love if you could hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast provider so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes. Thanks again for tuning in.